And while today's jobs numbers look rosy, you might be sitting at home saying, what about me? Lots of people have either given up looking or are underemployed. Joining me now is Tony Beshara. Tony's the author of 4 books on job hunting. He says lots of job hunters are confusing activity with productivity. What do people need to be doing, Tony, right now if you are frustrated with this job market, you want to get in front of the right person?
You got to recognize that the most important thing you can do is interview. It takes an average of 16 interviews to get a job, and it takes an average of almost 3 or 4 months to do that. And you got to have massive amounts of activity. You got to call lots and lots of people. You got to work the numbers. Most people get 3 or 4 interviews, they don't get hired, so then they stop, they have no momentum, and they don't push forward to extend their number of people that they talk to and get as many interviews as they possibly can.
So, Tony, you say a lot of conversations, a lot of telephone calls. How many? How many people do I call?
Well, you're going to have to call 100 people before you talk to 10 hiring authorities. Oh. You're going to have to talk to 10 hiring authorities before you get one to interview you, and you're going to have at least 10 of those before you get a viable opportunity that you may take or you may not. So it's just, and I try to teach this in my online program, the Job Search Solution. You got to have looking for a job is a job in itself, and you got to get those numbers to work for you, and you've got to realize it's a numbers thing. It's a systematic approach, and you've got to call those people every 30 to 45 to 60 days. Everybody knows 200 people, and those people know 200 people. So you got to just keep calling and calling and calling and get in front of as many people as you can. I
like your approach. You just can't get discouraged. You got to get on the telephone. You've got to talk to people. There's a lot of mid-career people out there very worried tonight, thinking, they're picking on me. I can't get a job.
Yeah.
Are they being too prickly? Are they being too focused on their own problems?
Well, you bring up a really good point, and it's not like the malaise that the guys were talking about a few minutes ago. It's kind of the attitude out there. If you're middle-aged, you think it's because you're middle-aged. If you're too short, too fat, too tall, a woman or a guy or a minority, you think that's what's against you. It's not. Those are some things that maybe some companies consider, but most of the time they're just looking for a really good employee. And we have a tendency when we don't get hired, we think it has to do with something other than I didn't talk to enough people or I didn't give them value of why I ought to be hired.
I like what you say about the phone calls. You've got to call everybody you know, not just people in your industry, friends, family, distant relatives, everybody you know, not just some of the people you know. We're talking about mid-career folks, right? And it's been very frustrating for a lot of those people. They feel like they're missing out. At what point do you start thinking, maybe I should switch careers?
Only when the career that you're in has dead-ended, to where there are just absolutely no jobs in it out there, and there's some, the mortgage industry has suffered a little bit over the past year or two. So I would be careful about thinking about changing industries. It's harder to do than most people think, because you have to start over. Now, if you're prepared to start over and take a real big cut in pay and start at the beginning, I would consider that along with the other things that you're considering, but realize it's going to be really hard to do. The whole thing is going to be really hard to do. That's the biggest message is it's going to be hard, and you're going to have to work really hard at it.
And know what you're up against. Tony, thanks for coming on. Great to see you.
Always a pleasure.